This program is all about food myths. Now, those who know me know that I write about garden myths, but I also keep an eye on food myths. Because of all the confusion out there, it's one of the reasons I wrote this book, Food Science for Gardeners. There really isn't another good book out there for gardeners about food and nutrition. There's some really good textbooks, but they go into topics we don't really care about as gardeners. So this book is focused on the things you really want to know. What is nutrition? How do you grow nutritious food? What affects the nutrition of food in your garden? And once you bring it indoors, how do you cook it, preserve it, so that the nutrition level stays nice and high? Anyways, let's go have a look at some of these myths. Here's a very common myth. You should drink 8 glasses of water every day. Now, it is true that water is an important nutrient and we have to get enough of it. It's also true that you need a certain amount every day. But the reality is that for most of us, we get all the water we need in our meals and in the drinks we have around our meals. So if you have some milk with dinner, or you have a coffee or a tea or a juice, you get a lot of water. The food you eat is full of water. Soups, stews obviously have water in them. But all your fruits and vegetables have a lot of water too. Lettuce, for instance, is 95% water. So almost everything you eat has water in it. And when you add up your food intake for the day, it works out to plenty of water for most people. This idea of carrying around a water bottle and taking a sip every few minutes is complete nonsense. You don't have to do that. Now, I'm sure there are some medical exceptions to this. So if your doctor says you have to drink more water, go ahead. And if you're an Olympic athlete, well, you work out a lot and you probably have to drink more water. But for the rest of us, it's not needed. What about fat? There's a lot in the news about how fat is harmful and we should reduce the amount we take in. And some people try to avoid it entirely. Too much fat is harmful in your diet, but you do need some. And one of the reasons you need the fat is for energy. A second one is that some of the vitamins we need are fat soluble. What that means is that you find those vitamins inside the fat. If you avoid fat, you don't get enough of those vitamins. So some fat is good, but stay away from too much. How about honey? Now, this is one of these health foods that's really good for you. Well, it turns out that's a complete myth as well. Honey is not much better for you than white sugar. It is true that honey does have certain minerals and vitamins, but the amounts of those are very, very small. It makes almost no difference in your diet. Honey is really just the sugar. But what about brown sugar? I mean, brown sugar is healthier for you, isn't it? Well, it turns out it isn't. In most cases, when we make sugar, we extract the sugar from things like sugar beets and sugar cane, and it's processed, and the sugar is extracted. We now have a brown sugary syrup, kind of a combination of sugar and molasses. And during the manufacturing process, the molasses is taken out to make white sugar. Brown sugar is made by taking that white sugar and adding a bit of the molasses back into the mixture. There are some brown sugars on the market that aren't made that way, but the majority of them are. There's really no difference between honey, sugar, and brown sugar as far as nutrition goes. Are fresh fruits and vegetables healthier for you? We have access to a number of processed foods. We have dried food like banana chips and frozen vegetables and canned beans. Surely fresh is better than these processed foods. In general, the difference between fresh and processed is pretty small. In developed countries, we process these foods very quickly. They come from the field into the factory and into the can or into a freezer very quickly, and so it preserves most of the nutrients. Provided that we haven't added a lot of other things to the food, processed food is almost as good as fresh. And in some cases, it's better because it's more readily available. Here's another very common myth. Organic food doesn't contain pesticides. That's a complete myth. And it's a reason why a lot of people buy organic food. They don't want the pesticides. Well, I have news for you. Organic farms are allowed to spray their food with pesticides. It just happens that they use a different list of pesticides than conventional farming. In many cases, the pesticides used by organic farmers are more toxic than the ones used in conventional farming. If you're buying organic food, food because it's pesticide free, you're missing the point. That does not mean all organic food has added pesticide. In your backyard, you may not use pesticides, and so you have a different type of organic food. The farmer down the street that you know very well, he might not use it either. But if you're going to a grocery store, most of the organic food has been sprayed with pesticide. Now here's another fact that's really important to understand. 99.9% of the pesticides we eat are not man-made. They're natural pesticides that the plants make. So if we grow a carrot, even if we grew it in a sterile environment, where chemicals are never added to the environment except for the nutrients that carrots need, that carrot will still produce pesticides. Plants have to fend off insects, and they do that by making their own pesticide. The majority of the pesticides we eat come from the healthy fruits and vegetables that we consume. There's no way around that. Now, the good news is that our bodies can handle a lot of chemical. And so even though these things are toxic, they don't really harm us because our bodies have adapted to consuming them. Here's something that I didn't know until I wrote my book, Food Science for Gardeners. And this has to do with the browning of apples. So when you slice an apple, it starts going brown. Now, I've always been told that if the apple goes brown, you have to cut that part off or scrape it off. You don't want to eat it because it's not good for you. Well, it turns out that there's nothing wrong with that brown coloration. What has happened is that when we slice the apple, the cells in the apple get crushed. And that releases a certain enzyme, a type of protein. And that enzyme reacts with the sugars in the apple and produces this brown coloration. Perfectly healthy, nothing wrong with it. Just eat it. How about washing food? How should you wash it? One procedure that is quite popular on the internet is to use soap to wash those vegetables. Now, the idea here is that soap is alkaline, and because it's alkaline, it kills the microbes. I mean, the same thing happens when you wash your hands, right? We put the soap on our hands, and we're killing the microbes, and we're disinfecting our hands and countertops and so on. I wrote about soap and how it's used to kill microbes on one of my blog posts, and someone commented on it, and they said, you're wrong. Soap actually doesn't kill microbes. So I had to look it up, and in fact, they were correct. Soap does not kill microbes. The reason we use soap on countertops and our hands and on food is to dislodge the microbes. They don't stick as well to the material once we put soap in there. The soap makes it easier for us to rinse those microbes down the drain, but they're not killed. Now, back to washing food with soap. Is this something you should be doing? Well, the answer is a really clear no. It turns out that first of all, soap is not healthy for you. It's actually toxic, and that includes dish soap and hand soap. It's toxic. Now, we don't ingest enough to cause us a problem, but it's still not good for us, so we shouldn't be putting it on our food. The second reason you shouldn't use soap or any other chemical to wash your food is that this has been studied. And what we found is that plain old running water works just as good as everything else that they tried. And this includes bleach and vinegar. It also includes commercial products. None of them worked as well as just plain running water. When we wash our fruits and vegetables, we are essentially knocking off those microbes off the surface of the food, and the water pushes them down the drain. I see a lot of talk about pathogens. Everyone's really worried about pathogens. How do I keep the pathogens off my vegetable? What happens when a cat or dog poops in the garden and then leaves behind pathogens? Well, I have news for you. Every bit of soil has pathogens in it. And here I'm talking about human pathogens. Your soil is not clean. It's full of pathogens. Every time you touch it, you could get sick from it. Pathogens also get on the plants, particularly root crop. But even plants that grow above ground, they have pathogens on them. Some of them are floating around in the air and land on the food. Some of them get splashed up from the soil. When you go and pick that fresh tomato and eat it in the garden, well, your hands had pathogens on them. And it got it from the other plants and soil that you touched before you picked the tomato. That's just part of life, and it's not something we have to be concerned about. Now, you can get some very serious diseases from your soil. So it's not a bad idea to wear gloves. It's also not a bad idea to wash your hands when you're finished gardening. But in general, you don't have to be overly concerned about. What about artificial flavor? They never taste quite right. So for instance, how about the artificial strawberry flavor? If you taste that, it tastes a bit metallic. It just doesn't taste like a real strawberry. And what a lot of people think is that the reason for that is that we've taken a number of chemicals and we've mixed them together and we've tried to make artificial strawberry flavor. Well, the reality is the problem is not with the chemicals we've put together. The problem is that we haven't used enough chemicals. So a typical artificial strawberry flavor has anywhere from 15 to 30 different compounds in it. The real strawberry uses several hundred chemicals to give it the flavor. So the problem is not that artificial flavors use chemicals. The fact is that they don't use enough chemicals. Now, a lot of you are probably going to have a hard time believing me on that because so many people are anti-chemical. But you have to remember that when you take that strawberry and pop it in your mouth, you're eating literally thousands and thousands of chemicals that the plant has produced. And many of those chemicals are very similar or even identical to the ones that we use in artificial flavor. Neither group of chemicals is any worse or better for you. One last myth I'd like to have a look at. We've been talking about nutrition and food. As a gardener, it'd be really great if you could go out in your garden and actually measure the amount of nutrition in our food. I mean, if you grow 2 different kinds of tomatoes, which one is more nutritious? If you grow carrots with fertilizer one year and without fertilizer the next year, which one produced a more nutritious carrot? So some people have come up with the idea of measuring bricks. There's a very simple device that you can use for measuring bricks. You take a couple drops of your food and put it on the lens, close it up, and shine it to some light and look at it. And there's a little scale inside, and it will give you a reading. It will tell you what your bricks value is. And so now there's people running around telling gardeners, oh, measure your bricks. That will tell you how good you're growing the food. It will tell you how nutritious that food is. That's a complete myth. The bricks reading is a measure of all the things in that drop, all the chemicals combined. The problem is that for most of our fruits and vegetables, that drop contains mostly sugars and carbohydrates. The amount of vitamins is so small compared to the amount of sugar that you can double and triple the amount of vitamin C in your carrot and it won't change the reading. Now, one thing that does change the reading a lot is water. So if you're growing in a drier year, and the carrots have less access to moisture, they will actually give you a higher reading because there's less water and the nutrients that are there are concentrated in a smaller amount of water. If the carrots are grown in a year where we get a lot of rain or you watered 2 or 3 days earlier, those carrots have absorbed water. And by absorbing water, they're actually diluting the chemicals inside the cell. So when you go to measure bricks, you'll get a lower value. So bricks is great for measuring sugar, and industries like the wine industry, they use it a lot for measuring grapes because that sugar content is so important to them. But as far as measuring nutrition goes, it's an absolutely useless tool. Just ignore comments about that. You can find Reality Time on YouTube, Substack, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I'll put links to these and our social pages in the description below. If you're interested in gardening, check out my YouTube channel called Garden Fundamentals or my blog called Garden Myths. Let the truth shine into your life.